Lieutenant Laura Mitchell had been alone on Prime for 11 months. She was the only human on the entire planet. Her job was simple. She watched the sensors, wrote reports, and tried not to bother the aliens who lived there. They did not like humans. They tolerated her presence because of a treaty signed far away on a space station she had never seen. But tolerance was not friendship. Tolerance was not even kindness. There were tall creatures who walked on two legs like humans but looked like wolves. They stood almost 7 feet tall with thick fur that ranged from silver to dark gray. Their eyes were amber-colored and always watching. They had claws on their hands and feet, and their teeth were sharp enough to tear through metal. Laura had read all the files about them before coming here. She knew they were dangerous. She also knew they were proud, loyal to their packs, and deeply suspicious of outsiders. Her outpost was a small building made of metal and plastic, sitting at the edge of a great forest. They lived in the forest. Sometimes Laura saw them moving between the trees, watching her from a distance. They never came close. They never spoke to her unless they had to. She had learned to live with the loneliness. On this particular evening, the twin suns of Prime were setting. The sky turned orange and purple, colors that Laura had grown to love despite everything else. She was outside collecting soil samples because that was one of her duties. The samples would be sent back to Earth for study. Nobody would probably ever look at them, but she did her job anyway. That was when she saw movement at the edge of the forest. Laura stopped what she was doing and looked. Something small was coming out of the trees. It moved slowly with difficulty, and she could hear a soft crying sound carried on the wind. As it got closer, she realized it was a cub, a child. The cub was tiny compared to the adults, maybe 3 feet tall. Its fur was silver and matted with dirt and dried blood. It walked on 3 legs because its left back leg dragged uselessly behind it. Every step made the cub cry out in pain, but it kept coming. It was coming straight toward Laura. She did not know what to do. The files she had read said that approaching young was forbidden. Parents protected their cubs with deadly force. But this cub was alone, hurt, and walking toward her like she was the only hope left in the world. Laura stayed very still. She did not want to scare the child. She did not want to make any sudden movements that might be seen as a threat. The cub reached her and collapsed at her feet. It looked up at her with amber eyes full of pain and fear and something else. Trust. This little creature trusted her, even though they had never met, even though humans and were barely friends. Then Laura heard the sounds behind the cub. They came out of the forest like ghosts, 20 adult, maybe more, appearing from between the trees without making a sound. They surrounded her in seconds, forming a circle with no gaps. Laura's heart pounded in her chest. Her hand moved toward the weapon on her belt, but she stopped herself. If she drew that weapon, she would die. She knew this with complete certainty. The circle parted and a massive male walked through. He was the biggest one Laura had ever seen, with dark gray fur and scars covering his face and body. One of his ears was missing, torn off in some long-ago battle. His eyes were cold and hard as he looked at her. Laura recognized him from the files. This was the Elder Alpha. He was the leader of the largest pack on Prime. His word was law among his people. If he decided Laura should die, she would die, and there would be nothing anyone could do about it. Stopped a few feet away from her. He looked down at the cub lying at her feet, then back up at Laura. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "Human, you know who I am." It was not a question, but Laura answered anyway. "Yes, Elder Alpha, I know who you are." "Good, then you know I do not waste words." He pointed at the cub. "This one is called, she is the daughter of my daughter. 3 cycles ago there was a rock slide in the mountains, was trapped. When we found her, her leg was crushed." Laura looked down at the cub. Such a small name for such a small creature. The cub looked back at her with those trusting eyes. "I am sorry," Laura said. "That must have been terrible." "Our healers did what they could," continued. "They set the bone, they wrapped the leg. They gave her medicines for the pain, but the bone did not heal correctly. It grew back wrong. Now she cannot walk without pain. Our healers say she will never walk normally again. They say the damage cannot be fixed. Laura felt a cold feeling in her stomach. She was starting to understand why they had come to her, and the understanding frightened her. Elder Alpha, I am not a healer. I am a communications officer. I watch sensors and write reports. I have basic medical training, but I am not a doctor. His eyes did not change. We have heard stories about humans, stories that have traveled across the stars. They say human healers can cut bodies open and put them back together. They say you can replace bones with metal. They say you can grow new organs in glass containers. They say you can do things that seem like magic to other species. Those are doctors, Laura said. Trained surgeons with years of education and special equipment. I am not one of them. But you are human. Yes, but that does not mean I can do surgery. I have never operated on anyone in my life. I would not know where to begin. Took a step closer. He was so big that Laura had to look up to meet his eyes. Behind him, the rest of the pack watched in silence. Laura could feel their attention like a physical weight pressing down on her. My healers say his leg cannot be fixed, said slowly. They say she will live her life in pain, unable to run, unable to hunt, unable to be a full member of the pack. I do not accept this. I have brought her to you because humans are supposed to be able to do the impossible. Laura looked at the cub again, had stopped crying. She was just watching Laura with those big amber eyes, waiting, hopping. You will fix what no healer could, said. You will make my granddaughter whole again. Laura opened her mouth to refuse, to explain again that she was not qualified, that she could not do what he was asking, that she might make things worse. But then she saw the look in his eyes, and she saw the look in the eyes of the female standing behind, a younger with tears streaming down her furred face. That had to be his mother. That had to be the daughter had mentioned. I need to make a call, Laura heard herself say. I need to talk to someone who can help me. Studied her for a long moment, then he nodded once. Make your call, human, we will wait. Laura picked up as gently as she could. The cub weighed almost nothing. She carried the child toward her outpost, surrounded by 20 warriors, knowing that she had just made a promise she had no idea how to keep. But she was going to try, because that was what humans did. They tried even when success seemed impossible. She just hoped that trying would be enough. Laura's quarters were small. There was a bed, a desk, and the communication equipment that connected her to the rest of human space. That equipment was her only hope now. She laid on her bed as gently as she could. The cub whimpered but did not cry out. The mother had followed them inside and now stood in the corner, watching everything with wet eyes. Laura sat at her desk and activated the quantum relay. This device could send messages across star systems in seconds. It was the most expensive piece of equipment in the outpost, and right now it was the most important thing in her life. She entered a code she had memorized months ago, a code for emergencies, a code that would reach the survey vessel Endeavour, which was orbiting a moon 3 star systems away. The screen flickered. A face appeared. It belonged to a man in his 50s with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too much. This was Dr. Benjamin Cole, the chief medical officer of the Endeavour. Laura had met him once during her training, and they had stayed in contact over the months of her isolation. He was the closest thing she had to a friend out here in the stars. Laura, Ben looked surprised and concerned. It is the middle of the night cycle here. What is wrong? Ben, I need your help. I need it right now, and I need you to not ask too many questions until I am done explaining. Something in her voice made him sit up. He nodded. Go ahead. Laura told him everything. She told him about and the injury and the rock slide. She told him about and the pack surrounding her outpost. She told him about the demand to fix what no healer could fix. She told him about the look in a mother's eyes and the trust in a child's face. Ben listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Send me images of the injury," he finally said. "I need to see what we are dealing with. I do not have a proper medical scanner, just the basic field kit." "Then use that. Take pictures from every angle. Measure the leg, the swelling, everything. I need as much information as you can give me." Laura turned to look at. The cub was lying still on the bed, watching her with those amber eyes, stood over her daughter like a protective shadow. "I need to examine your daughter," Laura said too. "I need to take pictures of her leg to send to another human who knows more about healing than I do." His eyes narrowed. "You said you would fix her." "I said I would try, but I need help. I am being honest with you. I cannot do this alone." The mother considered this for a moment. Then she nodded and stepped back, giving Laura room to work. Laura retrieved her field medical kit and began documenting his injury. She took pictures from every possible angle. She measured the length of both legs and noted the difference. She gently felt along the bone and recorded where whimpered in pain. She checked the cub's temperature, her pulse, her breathing. She did everything she could think of and then did it again to make sure she had not missed anything. When she sent the data to Ben, she felt like she was sending a prayer into the void. The reply came an hour later. Laura had spent that hour sitting with, telling the cub stories about Earth. She did not know if the child understood her, but the sound of her voice seemed to calm the little one. Listened to, her expression unreadable. Ben's face appeared on the screen again. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes now. Determination. "I have studied the images and data you sent," he said. "The fracture healed incorrectly. The bone fused at a bad angle, which is why she cannot walk properly. The medical term is—" "Can it be fixed?" Ben paused. "Yes, in theory. On Earth, we have surgeons who fix injuries like this all the time in human children. The procedure involves cutting through the malformed bone, realigning it correctly, and then stabilizing it with metal pins until it heals properly." Laura felt hope rise in her chest, followed immediately by fear. "But I am not a surgeon. I have never cut into anyone. I do not know how to do any of that." "I can teach you." Laura stared at the screen. "What?" "I can guide you through the procedure step by step. I will watch everything through the video feed. I will tell you exactly what to do and when to do it. It will not be easy and it will not be quick, but it can be done." "Ben, this is crazy. What if I make a mistake? What if I kill her?" "Then she will die," Ben said simply. "But if you do nothing, she will spend her entire life in pain, unable to walk properly, unable to be a full member of her pack. That is not really living either, is it?" Laura thought about his words, about what it meant to be a full member of a pack. Hunting, running, fighting, playing with other cubs. All the things would never be able to do if her leg stayed the way it was. "They will kill me if she dies," Laura said quietly. "Maybe, but they might also kill you if you refuse to try. And besides, I do not think that is why you are scared." He was right. Laura was scared because she cared. She was scared because she looked at that little cub with her trusting eyes and saw someone who deserved better than a life of pain. She was scared because she wanted so badly to help and was terrified of making things worse. "Tell me what I need," she said. Ben smiled and Laura saw pride in his expression. "That is the spirit. Now here is the plan." Over the next few hours, Ben explained everything she would need for the surgery. Proper surgical tools, anesthesia modified for body chemistry, sterile equipment, a portable imaging device so Ben could see exactly what Laura was doing in real time. "The Endeavor has fabrication systems," Ben said. "I can manufacture everything you need and send it by drone pod. It will take about 18 hours to reach you. What do I do until then?" "You prepare. You study. I am sending you files on anatomy. Read them until you can see the bone structure in your dreams. I'm also sending you videos of similar surgeries performed on humans. Watch them over and over until the steps are burned into your memory." Laura nodded. She was already exhausted, but she knew she would not be sleeping tonight, or probably the next night either. "Ben," she said before ending the call, "thank you for believing I can do this." "I do not believe you can do it," Ben replied. "I know you can do it. Humans have been performing miracles for thousands of years. This is just one more." The screen went dark. Laura turned to look at it. The mother was stroking her daughter's fur, singing softly in the language. Eyes were half closed. "The other human will help," Laura told. "He is sending me tools and teaching me what I need to know. In 18 hours I will try to fix your daughter's leg." "Stop singing." She looked at Laura with an expression that was part hope, part fear, and part something else that Laura could not name. "Why?" asked. "Why would you do this for us? We have not been kind to you. We have watched you from the forest like you were a dangerous animal. We have refused to speak to you or welcome you or treat you as anything other than an unwanted guest. Why would you risk your life for my daughter?" Laura thought about the question. She thought about all the months of loneliness, the cold looks from eyes, the feeling of being unwanted and unnecessary. "Because she is a child who needs help," Laura finally said. "And because I can try, maybe that is enough of a reason." Was silent for a long moment. Then she did something Laura had never seen her do. She bowed her head. "Thank you, human. Whatever happens, thank you for trying." Laura nodded and turned back to her communication equipment. She had 18 hours to learn how to perform surgery. She did not have time for sleep. She did not have time for doubt. She only had time to learn. And so she began. The drone pod arrived exactly 18 hours later. Laura had not slept at all during that time. She had studied the anatomy files until her eyes burned. She had watched the surgery videos until she could describe every step from memory. She had cleaned her quarters until every surface was spotless, turning the small room into something that might pass for an operating theater. They watched her work with silent interest, had ordered that Laura not be disturbed, so no one came inside except who refused to leave her daughter's side. But through the windows, Laura could see the amber eyes watching. The entire pack was waiting to see if the human could really do the impossible. The drone pod contained everything Ben had promised. Surgical tools made of metal so sharp they could cut through bone. Anesthesia drugs mixed specifically for body chemistry. Sterile cloths and bandages and cleaning solutions. And most importantly, a portable imaging device that would let Ben see exactly what Laura was doing in real time. Laura spent 2 hours setting everything up. She arranged the tools in the exact order she would need them. She calibrated the imaging device and tested the video connection with Ben 3 times. She put on the sterile gloves and mask and practiced moving her hands without touching anything she should not touch. When everything was ready, she called for to be brought in. Carried her daughter to the table Laura had covered with sterile cloth. The cub looked smaller than ever, her silver fur dull from days of pain and worry. But her eyes were still alert, still watching Laura with that strange trust that had been there from the beginning. "Hello, little one," Laura said softly. "I am going to try to fix your leg today. You are going to go to sleep for a while, and when you wake up, hopefully everything will be better." Reached out with one small paw and touched Laura's hand. "I am not afraid," the cub said in her small voice. "Mother says you are a good human." Laura felt her heart squeeze tight in her chest. She looked at who nodded once. "I told her that you stayed awake all night learning how to help her," said. "I told her that you are doing something very brave. I told her that if anyone can fix her leg, it is you." Laura did not feel brave. She felt terrified. But she smiled it anyway and said, "Your mother is very kind. Now are you ready?" Nodded. Ben's face appeared on the screen mounted next to the operating table. He looked tired too, but his voice was steady and calm. "All right, Laura, let us begin. The first step is to administer the anesthesia. The dose is in the green vial already measured." Laura picked up the vial with steady hands. She was surprised by how calm she felt now that the moment had actually arrived. All the fear and doubt seemed to have faded away, replaced by a clear focus on the task ahead. She inserted the needle into the IV line that she had carefully placed in his arm an hour earlier. She pushed the drug into the cub's bloodstream and watched as his eyes grew heavy. "I will see you soon," whispered. Then her eyes closed. Made a small sound of distress. Laura touched the mother's arm gently. "She is just sleeping. The drugs are working. She will not feel any pain." Nodded, but her eyes never left her daughter's face. "All right," Ben said through the speaker. "Now we begin. Pick up the scalpel. We are going to make the first cut along the side of the leg, about 3 centimeters above where the bone healed wrong." Laura picked up the scalpel. It felt impossibly light in her hand. She had held tools before, plenty of times, but she had never held something that she was about to use to cut into a living being. "You can do this," Ben said, as if reading her thoughts. "Focus on my voice. Nothing else exists right now, just my instructions and your hands." Laura took a deep breath and made the first cut. Blood welled up immediately. It was darker than human blood, almost purple in color. Laura felt her stomach lurch, but she did not stop. She continued the incision exactly as Ben had described, cutting through fur and skin to expose the muscle beneath. "Good," Ben said. "Now we need to separate the muscle tissue to expose the bone. Use the retractors to hold the incision open." Laura worked slowly and carefully. Every few seconds, Ben would give her another instruction. "Pull here. Cut there. Be careful of that blood vessel. Clamp that. Good, now continue." The minutes stretched into hours. Laura lost track of time completely. Her entire world narrowed to the small area of his leg where she was working, and the steady voice of Ben guiding her through each step. When she finally exposed the bone, she saw exactly what Ben had described in the files. A ridge of calcified growth where the fracture had healed wrong. The bone had fused at an angle that pushed his leg out of alignment. No wonder the cub could not walk properly. "Now comes the difficult part," Ben said. "You need to use the bone saw to cut through that malformed section. Keep your hand steady and let the tool do the work." Laura picked up the bone saw. It was a small device, much smaller than she had expected. She pressed it against the bone and activated it. The vibration traveled up her arm and into her shoulder. The sound it made was high and whining, like nothing she had ever heard before. Laura felt sick, but she kept going. She had to keep going. When she cut through the bad section of bone, it came away in her hand. A small piece of that had been causing so much pain. Laura set it aside and looked at what remained. "Now we realign," Ben said. "This is the part that requires strength. You need to pull the bone into the correct position." Laura gripped the bone as Ben instructed. She pulled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sensation she felt more than heard, the bone shifted into place. "Perfect," Ben said. "Now the pins." The pins were thin rods of a special metal that the body would not reject. Laura drilled them into the bone exactly where Ben told her, securing the alignment so it could not shift while healing. Each pin took several minutes to place correctly. Laura's arms ached from holding them steady. Finally, after what felt like forever, Ben said the words Laura had been waiting to hear. "Now close the incision, layer by layer, just like I showed you in the videos." Laura stitched muscle to muscle. She stitched skin to skin. She wrapped the leg in clean bandages. When she placed the final piece of tape, she stepped back from the table and realized she was shaking from head to toe. "It is done," Ben said. There was pride in his voice. "Laura, that was perfect. That was absolutely perfect." Laura looked at. The cub was still sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The leg that had been so badly damaged was now straight, wrapped in white bandages, held in place by metal pins that would help the bone heal correctly. Moved forward slowly. She leaned over her daughter and inhaled deeply, a gesture that Laura knew was used to assess another's condition. Then she looked at Laura with tears streaming down her furred face. "The leg is straight," whispered. "For the first time since the rock slide, the leg is straight." Laura did not know what to say. Her throat was too tight for words. All she could do was nod. "Will she walk?" asked. "If everything goes well with the healing, yes. She will need time to recover. She will need exercises to make her legs strong again. But if she does all of that, she should be able to walk normally. She might even be able to run." Stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, the mother pressed her forehead against Laura's forehead. It was a gesture Laura recognized from her studies. The most profound expression of gratitude in culture, reserved only for those who had saved a life. "Thank you, human," whispered. "Thank you for my daughter." Laura closed her eyes and let the tears she had been holding back finally fall. She had done it. She had actually done it. And this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed the surgery were the longest of Laura's life. She barely slept. She barely ate. Every moment was spent watching over, checking her vital signs, changing her bandages, and making sure the leg was healing the way it was supposed to heal. On the third day after the surgery, developed a fever. Laura felt her heart stop when she saw the numbers on her medical scanner. She immediately contacted Ben, who was still monitoring from the Endeavor. "The temperature is elevated," Laura said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Is this normal? Is something wrong? Did I make a mistake?" Ben studied the data she sent him. His face was serious but not panicked, which helped Laura breathe a little easier. "This is actually normal," he said after a moment. "The body is reacting to the foreign material. The metal pins are being accepted, but the immune system is working hard. Keep her hydrated. Give her the fever medicine from the kit. If it does not come down in 24 hours, then we worry." The fever broke 12 hours later. His temperature returned to normal, and color came back to her silver fur. Laura sat beside the cub's bed and cried with relief. Visited every day. The elder Alpha never said much. He would simply walk into Laura's quarters, look at his granddaughter, and then look at Laura with an expression she could not read. Sometimes he would nod. Sometimes he would grunt. Then he would leave. But Laura noticed that other things were changing too. The who used to watch her from a distance were now watching her from much closer, and their expressions had changed. Where before there had been suspicion and hostility, now there was something else. Curiosity, interest, maybe even respect. They began bringing gifts. The first time it happened, Laura was so surprised she did not know what to do. A young male appeared at her door holding a bundle of preserved meat wrapped in leaves. "For the human healer," he said, then quickly left before Laura could respond. After that, gifts arrived every day. Woven blankets made from plant fibers, small carved figures of animals, containers of a sweet drink that tasted like honey and berries. Laura tried to refuse at first, but she quickly learned that refusing a gift was considered very rude. So she accepted everything and found places in her small quarters to store it all. Then the sick began to arrive. The first one was a warrior named. He came to Laura's door with a wound on his arm that had become infected. Medicine had failed to heal it. The flesh around the cut was red and swollen and oozing a foul liquid. Laura cleaned the wound carefully. She applied antibiotics from her medical kit. She showed how to change the bandages himself and gave him pills to take for the next 5 days. Within a week, the infection was gone, could use his arm again. Word spread quickly through the pack lands. The human healer could do things that healers could not. She had medicines that worked when medicines failed. She had knowledge that came from the stars. An elderly female came next. Her joints hurt so badly that she could barely walk. Laura recognized the symptoms immediately. Her own grandmother on Earth had suffered from the same condition. Laura made a simple medicine for the pain and showed the elder exercises that would help keep her joints from getting worse. A young male arrived with 3 fingers missing from a hunting accident years ago. Laura could not give him new fingers, but she designed a simple device that attached to his hand and let him grip a spear again. When the young male tested it and found that it worked, he howled with joy so loudly that the entire pack could hear him. Days turned into weeks. Laura found herself running a small clinic out of her quarters. She treated cuts and burns and fevers. She set broken bones and stitched wounds and mixed medicines. She worked until she was exhausted, slept for a few hours, then woke up and did it all again. Ben watched all of this through their daily video calls. Sometimes he helped with difficult cases, offering advice and suggestions. But most of the time, he just watched with a proud smile on his face. "You know what you are doing, right?" he said one evening. "Making it up as I go along," Laura replied. "That is what every doctor does. We just have fancier degrees." He paused. "You should consider formal medical training when your assignment here ends. Earth needs people who can bridge gaps like this." Laura thought about it. She had never planned to be a healer. She had joined the diplomatic service because she wanted to see alien worlds and meet alien peoples. But this work, this helping, it felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. Then came the day that changed everything. Took her first steps. Laura had designed a recovery program based on human physical therapy, exercises to strengthen the muscles around the healing bone, stretches to maintain flexibility, slow, careful movements that gradually increased in difficulty. Had complained constantly. She was still a child, after all, and the exercises were boring and sometimes painful. But she had also worked harder than any patient Laura had ever read about. Every day, without fail, she did exactly what Laura told her to do. On the morning of the 42nd day after surgery, stood up from her bed without help. She looked at Laura, then at her mother, then at who had arrived for his daily visit. Then she walked. 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps. Her leg trembled but held. Her face twisted with effort but not pain. She was walking. She was really, truly walking. The howl that erupted from the watching outside was so loud that Laura felt it in her bones, burst into tears. Even stoic face cracked into something that looked very much like joy. Walked straight to Laura and threw her small arms around the human's waist. "Thank you," the cub said. "Thank you for fixing me." Laura hugged her back, blinking away her own tears. "You fixed yourself, little one. I just helped." "No," said firmly. "You fixed me. You made me whole again. I will never forget, never, ever, ever." Laura laughed and picked up the cub, holding her close. Over his shoulder, she could see watching them with a smile. And beyond, through the window, she could see dozens of faces all turned toward her quarters, all of them wearing expressions she had never seen before. Hope, gratitude, wonder. For the first time since she had arrived on Prime, Laura did not feel alone. That night after had gone to sleep and the pack had returned to the forest, Laura sat outside her quarters and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond those points of light, was Earth. Was Ben on the Endeavor. Were billions of humans who had no idea what had happened on this small, distant world. But something had happened, something important. A human had healed a child, and in doing so she had started to heal something else. The distance between their peoples, the fear and suspicion and mistrust. One patient at a time. One miracle at a time. Laura smiled and closed her eyes, feeling at peace for the first time in a very long while. The quarterly diplomatic shuttle arrived 2 months after surgery. It descended from the sky on a pillar of blue flame and landed in the clearing near Laura's outpost, just as it had done 3 times before during her assignment. But this time, everything was different. Ambassador walked down the boarding ramp with her usual expression of bored efficiency. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen 100 worlds. She expected to find the same quiet, lonely outpost she had visited before. The same isolated lieutenant filing reports that nobody read. What she found instead was a celebration. The entire pack had gathered around the clearing, not watching from a distance with suspicious eyes, but standing in welcome, their postures relaxed, their expressions friendly. Cubs played in the grass while their parents talked in small groups. Warriors who had once looked at humans with hostility now nodded in greeting as the ambassador stepped off the shuttle. Stopped at the bottom of the ramp, her expression shifting from bored to confused to stunned in the space of 3 seconds. "Lieutenant Mitchell," she said slowly, "what exactly have you been doing here?" Laura smiled. "Building bridges, ma'am, one patient at a time." Before could respond, stepped forward. The Elder Alpha was wearing ceremonial armor that had not been brought out since the treaty signing. His face was arranged in an expression of formal welcome. "Ambassador," he said in common that was much better than it had been 2 months ago, "we welcome you to Prime. You honor us with your presence. Please join our feast." Looked at Laura with wide eyes. Laura just shrugged and gestured for the ambassador to follow toward the food that had been prepared. The feast lasted 3 days. Laura had never experienced anything like it. The brought out food and drinks that she had never seen before. There was music played on strange instruments that made haunting sounds. There was dancing that looked like fighting, but was actually a celebration of life and joy. There was storytelling that went on for hours, tales of great hunts and ancient battles and heroes who had become legends. Laura sat in a place of honor beside and had claimed a spot right next to Laura and refused to move, her newly healed leg stretched out in front of her like a badge of pride. The cub's limp was barely noticeable now. In another few weeks, it would be gone entirely. On the final night of the feast, as the twin moons of Prime rose over the forest, stood to address the gathered crowd. Both Inhumans had gathered to listen. The ambassador and her small crew sat among the aliens as if they had always belonged there. "When the humans first came to our world," said, his voice carrying across the clearing, "we saw only danger. We knew of their reputation. They were galaxy conquerors. They were builders of terrible weapons. They were creatures who could crack planets with their machines of war. We feared what such beings might do to us. We watched them and waited for them to show their true nature." The crowd was silent. Even the cubs had stopped playing to listen. But we did not know humans, not truly, turned to look at Laura. We did not know that the same hands which build weapons can also heal wounds. We did not know that the same minds which conquer worlds can also conquer death itself. We did not know that the same hearts which wage war can also break with compassion for a stranger's child. He lifted a ceremonial cup, filled with the sacred drink that Laura had learned was reserved for only the most honored occasions. "To the humans," said, "not conquerors but healers, not enemies but friends. May our packs run together beneath the twin suns now and forever." The toast was echoed by hundreds of voices. Howls mixed with human cheers in a sound that had never been heard before on Prime. Later that night, after the celebration had quieted and the fires had burned low, Laura walked to the edge of the forest and looked up at the stars. She thought about everything that had happened. A limping cub appearing from the trees, a desperate demand from a proud elder alpha, a surgery that should have been impossible, and now this, peace, friendship, understanding. Her communicator buzzed. Ben's voice came through, warm with pride. "I watched the whole celebration through the satellite feed," he said. "Speech is going to be broadcast across every diplomatic network in human space. Do you understand what this means?" "That I am going to have a lot of paperwork to file." Ben laughed. "It means that a single human stationed alone on a world full of suspicious aliens managed to do what entire diplomatic teams could not accomplish in years of negotiation. You changed everything, Laura. Not with weapons, not with treaties, not with political games, with compassion. Laura thought about all the patients she had treated, with her broken leg, with his infected wound, the elderly female with painful joints, the young male with missing fingers, dozens of others who had come to her door looking for help and found it. "Maybe that is what we are supposed to be," she said softly. "Not conquerors, not warriors, healers." "I think you might be right," Ben said, "and I think the galaxy is starting to realize it too." A small hand tugged at Laura's uniform. She looked down to see who had snuck away from her mother again to find her human friend. The cub's eyes reflected the starlight. "Will you stay," asked, "on Prime with us?" Laura knelt down so she was at eye level with the cub. She thought about Earth. She thought about the career opportunities that might be waiting for her there. She thought about the comfortable life she could have if she returned to human space. Then she thought about the look in his eyes when he had called her a healer. The weight of his forehead pressed against hers in that moment of profound gratitude. The joy on his face when she took her first steps on a leg that everyone said could never be fixed. She thought about all the who still needed help, all the illnesses she could treat, all the injuries she could heal, all the bridges she could build between two peoples who were only just beginning to understand each other. "Yes," Laura said, pulling into a hug, "I will stay." The cub pressed against her, warm and trusting. "Good, because I would miss you if you left." "I would miss you too, little one." They stood there together for a long moment, human and looking up at the stars that connected their worlds. Behind them, the celebration continued. Voices rose in song and laughter. Two species that had been strangers were becoming friends. Laura did not know what the future would bring. She did not know if this new peace would last, if other humans would come and build on what she had started, if they would continue to trust her people. There were still so many questions, so many uncertainties, so much that could go wrong. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. She had seen a cub limping toward her in the fading light of twin suns. An entire pack had gathered, expecting her to fix what no healer could. And she had done it. Not because she was special, not because she was the most qualified, but because she was willing to try. Maybe that was what made humans special, not their weapons or their technology or their ability to conquer worlds. Maybe it was simply their willingness to try, to reach out, to help, even when success seemed impossible. The twin suns of Prime began to rise, casting their golden light across a world that would never see humanity the same way again. And Laura Mitchell, lieutenant-turned-healer, smiled as she watched the dawn of a new day. This was just the beginning.